David Michael Maurer is a director and editor whose work includes reality shows like American Idol, the drama series Startup, and the independent horror film Splinter. In part one of the Swazzle Lunch Break, we talked to Dave about his award-winning all-puppet student film, The Mystery of Cobblestone Way, his latest music video, Superhuman, and the important relationship between the writer and the director. We started our conversation by asking Dave how he began his career as an editor.
I started my career in post-production as an editor a long time ago. I had a friend who was an editor, and I was probably 15 years old, and he said, hey, I want to teach you how to assist me so that at night and on your weekends and stuff, you could work for me and learn how this works. So I did that and learned editing very early on at a very base level. And we were doing stuff like industrials and little spots like that in kind of the heyday of Silicon Valley when it was blowing up in the dot-com boom. And then went to community college, met these incredible puppeteer twins.
Deanza, we went to Deanza Community College, and that is where we met, in Cupertino, California.
Yeah, where the iPhone was launched.
Yeah, right. Just down the street. So the iPhone
the Flint Center.
At the Flint Center. Yeah. You mentioned the early days of digital editing. That was, and I mentioned this a lot to people, because of our the years that we happened to be at Deanza, we would get all of the new Apple products because Apple headquarters was literally 3 blocks away from the campus. So we would get to use all of the digital editing systems we were using, and I'm sure you as well, were using editing systems that studios weren't even using at the time.
Yeah, we didn't even have manuals for some of them back then. So that was like one of my jobs there, was to try and put together a manual for classroom use, because there wasn't enough paperwork to kind of illustrate some of those systems, which is crazy.
The first project that we worked on together, so we were at Deanza still at the time, and you had gone down to Loyola Marymount. And
we were on Deanza's 5-year program.
Yeah, 5-year program in junior college. We were taking animation classes and such. When we started working together, it was the student film called The Mystery of Cobblestone Way. Let's reminisce a little bit and tell everyone about that very elaborate, ambitious puppet film.
Looking back, we're kind of crazy to try and do that on. This is a student film. I'm a big fan of Tim Burton, and I wanted to do something that was like a simple family story, but like with a really complicated design to it. I pictured this London street and a bunch of cobblestones and this very simple tale. And I pitched it to you guys, and you're like, why don't we do something with puppets? And it kind of evolved. We ended up coming in on like day one with very little resources, though Lee and Kamala filled up a van for you guys of like just an amazing, just all this tree foliage and just all this stuff that we could use.
And they lent us their flocking gun.
The flocking gun, that's right.
We flocked almost every set for some reason, like the tree house and all this stuff.
And we built, we basically on the soundstage at Loyola Marymount built a forest, a house,
a lake,
and
it was all elevated. Let's not lose.
Yeah, it was four feet off the ground, and it was huge. And so they started taking tours through it while we were shooting, which is hysterical. No, it was just a simple story about this couple, and there were a couple raccoons with a dog, and Mrs. Raccoon was blind, and there was a rock goblin who was turning every animal into stone in the forest. But because Mrs. Raccoon was blind, he couldn't convert her into a rock. So she fought back and undid the spell and revealed all the forest creatures at the end. It was fun, but ambitious.
Yes. And
expensive.
Expensive. And let's just note that at that time, all shot on film, because while there was, plenty of digital editing going on, digital cameras, I feel like were almost like the last to evolve to the point where you could have an acceptable image quality.
I think we shot that on Super 16, and that was like right at the cusp, for film schools, where oftentimes they wanted you to finish on film, edit on film, and we were right at the turning point. And so I was able to say, hey, I want to shoot Super 16, but telecine and transfer to a digital format so that I can get a real colorist to go in and make it look good. Because that's the thing, is like everyone graduates film school with these horrible looking films back in the days. Today they're great, right? Like,
Right, yeah. Because you can just
gorgeous.
almost practically throw an Instagram filter on it and it looks good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was cool about this little short is the opening is a very complex watercolor After Effects preamble, and then there's even a CG shot, a full CG shot in the film.
Right.
And let's just reset a little bit. This was being made in what?
Well,
2000
99?
Yeah, 99. I remember because we were shooting the same weekend that Star Wars Episode 1 came out.
Right.
And the rule on set was we hadn't seen it yet because we'd been working so hard building puppets and sets. They were like, we can't talk about Episode 1 on set. No one can talk about it. And then we finally saw it at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, and we were so disappointed. Well, they probably should have talked about it on set. Yeah, we saw The Matrix on that same trip. And we're like,
that's
Matrix is amazing. But I remember we kind of get hints about Episode 1 because people were like, don't say anything about it. People kind of make like a serious face, like, oh, yeah, don't worry. Like, oh, this doesn't seem very good. Let's talk about this music video that you have just directed and edited that has this really fun kind of throwback to the 1980s with practical creatures, and tell us a little bit about it. And it's Superhuman. Superhuman is the actual music video. That's the one that you did the video for.
Yes. Ari Avatari came to me. He was working on an album. This is pre-COVID. And it was, I want to say 2000, like fall of 2019. And he played me some music, and then he played me this track, and I loved it. We had done like a lyric video before for fun, and it turned out nice. And but he showed me this song, and I loved it. And I was like, okay, let's do something bananas. Because, you know, part of the struggle for, I think, a lot of independent music artists, but also independent filmmakers, is like we have to like kind of swing for the fences. Like there is so much noise and competition, just, you know, millions of videos being uploaded to YouTube every day. You know, and none of us have the budget of like a major studio. So you have to try to make something that people will connect with, find interesting, that kind of can cut through the noise a little bit, or else it just kind of becomes a relic on a shelf, you know? So he brought me this thing, and I said, let's get really crazy. Let's consider doing it with puppets, and maybe, you know, like we love movies. We love the old 1980 films, 80s films. I'm a huge fan of a lot of those directors from that era. And it was just like, let's do puppets. Let's get crazy. Let's do an 80s thing. Let's parody stuff that we love. And it became like a little love letter. But we came to you, and you guys weren't available because you were doing everything. You're working like on every project at the time. You're like, we are booked, but we want to try and work it out. So we waited, and I think that January of 2020, we were able to work it in.
The nice thing about this project was, and this is not always the case with these things, is, you know, with your contribution, Dave, your creative inspiration and ideas, I designed the characters. I built the little worm puppet, and then Sean built the fuzzy puppet at the end. And it's kind of nice too that we get to come full circle on a project with you where we actually got to do the work. You know, I think had it come around in 2019 when we were working on Crank Yankers and all these other crazy projects, we probably would have just had, you know, another one of our builders build it. But it was kind of nice that, you know, we got to kind of go back and be the ones that created the characters for your new short.
Yeah.
And then also, I just want to give a shout out to Rachel Herrick, who is the puppeteer.
She's so great.
Yeah, and I thought she did a great job. I know that she was actually chatting with Ari on his live feed. Puppetry that she does is great, and her contribution was, you know, super, super awesome. Ari just says, at Adorable Rachel, who is Rachel Herrick, is a magician.
For sure.
And where did you guys shoot? You shot on a lot of location stuff.
We filmed in a friend of mine, some friend's house. They had this like really, it's like over 100 years old. And it's one of those houses that got like picked up and moved and reset in a different part of town, but it's historic. And it has that warm, like wooden craftsman 80s feel, and I was like, oh, this is magic. Like and they were open to letting us film there. I don't know if they'll let anyone else film there after it, because it is it's a invasive process to bring in a film crew.
Suddenly there's cables running to the front door, and
sure, the animals.
You're looking for generators. Is this is this connected to this?
Right, and we had an incredible crew too, and they were really responsible. We had tennis balls on everything, and really trying to protect the house because it was so historic. And then we filmed at a historic ranch in Simi Valley called Corriganville, which is it's been used as a filming ranch. In fact, I think they shot part of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood there.
Okay.
I think they shot part of Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's a giant sprawling, you can hike there for fun. But don't film there because they have, I mean, without a permit. They're very conscientious about that. We were permitted. We were, we're indie, but we weren't so indie that we weren't allowed to,
Yeah, you want to make sure you get your footage shot.
Yeah. But a lot of people love that place so much that they just go up there with cameras, and the city's like, hey, hold on, this timeout. This is a special place,
Right. When people actually get to see the music video, the fact that it's a craftsman home kind of goes back to that kind of Back to the Future kind of feeling that you were going for. Think about Doc Brown's house, obviously the vest that he's wearing, the guitar, the fact that it's puppets. And then at the beginning, not to give anything away too much, but there was that, because it's on the cover of the album, I think, the spaceship. And you kind of went back and forth originally with the digital creation, but how did you actually achieve the spaceship? Because I think it really kind of plays into this vibe that you were going for.
We had a completely digital version for a long time. And then at one point I was like, we were trying to figure out like, well, how do you do this? And the 80s were so specific about doing special effects and having practical things. So we had puppets, we had these physical things you can hold, but the spaceship being digital felt like a little fake. And so we actually went in and I got a pie tin and just rotated it slowly, and then took the pie tin into After Effects and then added all sorts of augmentation to it to really give it like little electricity and glow and things, and it's just very simple, but it's like effective enough to kind of set the thing. Yeah. And once you're in After Effects, you can blur it and move it and make it zip around the sky like it's nothing. But but it feels much more real than a VFX shot.
You edit a lot, with crazy interesting characters, and you directed now some crazy interesting characters. What's it like to be on both sides of the process in that? What's it like to be the editor, kind of bringing these things to life, and what's it like to be on set, covering puppets and bringing them to life?
They're complementary skills, but they're different. They support different parts of the filmmaking process. When I'm directing, I'm thinking about, I really look at, like, if I'm working with puppets, it's like every time the puppet's on in the frame, it's like a special effect. It's like, and it has to be thought through carefully and planned. And we had a lot of little, like, simple gags in this music video that required a lot of pre-planning to figure out how to do what we needed to do. And you can't just wing it. It's just not, it doesn't work. So there's a lot of that. And also when I'm directing, I'm thinking about getting more than I need. I'm trying to capture, I have specific ideas and intent, but I also am covering to make sure that I have enough there for post-production, and sort of gathering. And when I'm editing, I'm looking strictly at the image, strictly at the story. And I'm looking at tempo, timing, how the tone and the feeling makes me feel, and trying to make sure that the story that I'm telling is coming across in the best way it can. I had a friend that a couple of years ago had an interesting analogy, which is and I'm going to misquote it, but essentially he was like, yeah, it's sort of like you're trying to cook a really nice dinner for some friends. And so for him, pre-production was like growing plants. When you're writing, you're planning, it's like you're growing the crop, you're watering it, you're nurturing it, it becomes this thing. Production for him was like going to the grocery store, and you're preparing for this meal, so you actually get a little bit more than you need just in case. You're sort of covering your bases, make sure that somebody has allergies, you can set them up okay, right? And you're collecting enough, because if you don't have that ingredient for your dinner party, you're gonna really regret it later, right? So you get what you need. And then in post-production, it's like being a chef, and you are trimming and refining and plating it, and really making it so that it's something special that people can enjoy. And the chef can improvise, the chef can tweak something really dramatically, or have a new idea in the moment and be like, oh, let's try this. I think a lot of people kind of misunderstand the editing process sometimes, because it's not just a director. It's a real collaboration between a director and an editor, or a producer and an editor. And that back and forth is what creates that final thing that we all enjoy,
Join us for part 2 of our conversation with David Michael Maurer, where he discusses editing the horror film Splinter, goes in depth on the editorial process, and discusses the future of puppetry in film. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on the Swazzle Lunch Break.